Hello, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the eve of November 25th, 2023 in the United States, the morning of November 26th, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the truce between Israel and Hamas and the hostage exchange, there was almost a breakdown in the deal today as the hostage exchange was delayed and both sides were accusing each other of violating the agreement. Already yesterday, Israel identified there may be problems brewing as it reviewed the list of hostages the Hamas was going to release, and it noted that Hamas was violating the agreement by putting on the list a daughter of a mother. Both of them are kidnapped in the Gaza Strip. However, Hamas was going to release the daughter and not the mother, which violates the initial agreement. In turn, a Qatari delegation arrived in Israel today in order to try and negotiate this, and things did in fact begin to break down. Hamas announced that it was going to delay the release of hostages, citing what it considered violations on Israel's part. According to Hamas, Israel had pledged to allow 208 trucks to enter each day. However, only 340 had entered in the last 48 hours. Trucks were not being permitted to move up north, which also is supposed to be coordinated with the IDF. They accused the IDF of using live fire against Gazan civilians who were trying to return to their homes up north. And primarily, Hamas's main accusation is that Israel was not releasing prisoners in the order in which Hamas expected. Hamas was demanding that Israel release Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails from the one that had been in jail the longest to the one that had been in jail the shortest. Israel, in turn, said that it had not pledged to do this and said it would only make an effort to do this. In turn, Hamas stated that they had not committed to release mothers and daughters and not separate families, and only said they would make an effort to do this. Israel responded by stating that it had approved the entrance of 200 trucks each day and that any delays are occurring at Rafah crossing, and also stated that if the hostages are not released by midnight, the ground offensive is going to resume in full force. Throughout the day, there was monumental pressure mounted by Qatar, and actually a delegation of Egyptian generals arrived at Rafah in order to meet with Hamas emissaries and mount pressure on them, and the exchange eventually did occur. 13 Israeli citizens were released. These included a mother and 18-year-old daughter, whose father is still considered missing, a mother and a 12-year-old daughter, a grandmother, mother, and two daughters aged 8 and 3, whose father remains in captivity, a brother and sister aged 16 and 13. Their mother was killed on October 7th. The father remains in captivity. A 21-year-old woman who is the first woman from the Re'im party who was kidnapped to be released. Her brother remains in captivity. In addition, a 14-year-old girl whose mother remains in captivity. This is the mother that Hamas was not releasing, that was threatening to break down the deal. She remains in captivity. And her 9-year-old friend, Emily Hand, who was initially reported killed and then was in captivity, she was released as well. In addition, 4 citizens of Thailand were also reported released and are in Israel. 2 hours after the release of the hostages, 39 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails and dispersed to various places in the West Bank. A total of 195 hostages remain in the Gaza Strip, and there's substantial concern reported about how the deals are going to proceed in the coming days. According to different reports, all the negotiating teams from the United States, Egypt, Qatar, who's largely representing Hamas, and Israel have been working around the clock in order to make sure that there are no further delays in the coming days. Regarding additional details relating to the hostage exchange, several family members of the hostages that were released yesterday gave interviews in the last 24 hours reporting on how their family members were treated in captivity. They stated they were not tortured or abused, but that food had started to become scarce after the first few weeks of the war, and stating that as the weeks of the war went on, they were moved from place to place, and in different situations, they were not permitted to leave their rooms, or even to go to the bathroom, which sometimes required an hour or two, without escorts. In addition, the Red Cross today put out an emphatic denial of a rumor that had been spreading following a video of the first release that occurred. In this video, a Red Cross member is seen putting his hand on the back of a Hamas operative, and rumors spread that he had tried to plant a listening device on the Hamas operative. The Red Cross emphatically denied this throughout the day. Regarding what's going to happen in the next coming days, the list of hostages that is going to be released tomorrow has been given by Hamas to Israel, and Israel is currently reviewing it. In addition, there are growing indications that Hamas is indeed going to try to extend the truce by a few days by releasing additional hostages. According to the initial deal, if Hamas releases upwards of 10 hostages per day, it can quote-unquote buy itself another day of truce. Hamas is reporting that they have found 10 to 20 more hostages that meet the criteria of releasing women and or minors under the age of 19. The Egyptian Al-Qahar Al-Akhbar newspaper also reported about this and stated that Hamas is indeed going to try to extend the ceasefire, and the Saudi Al-Hadith news network also suggested that the Qatari envoy that is visiting Israel and Hamas is also trying to work on this. Regarding the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, the truce was maintained in the last 24 hours. No rockets or missiles were fired from the Gaza Strip, and there is no fighting that was reported on the ground. However, it was reported throughout the day that the IDF was poised to return to a full escalation if the hostages were not released by midnight. It was reported, however, that Mohammed Hamada, who is a Hamas senior official and spokesperson for Hamas's Jerusalem branch, however he does reside in Gaza, was assassinated several days ago before the truce went into effect. This may be related to a report I gave on November 18th, where I stated that there was an attack that the IDF carried out in Khan Yunis, in which they stated that they targeted a Hamas main figure but not the top leadership. This may have been targeting him. Either way, the report is that he was assassinated several days ago. Regarding casualties, no casualties are reported in the last 24 hours on either side in the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, according to the United Nations, upwards of 187 trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies did manage to enter in the last 24 hours. So despite the accusations of Hamas that only 70 trucks had entered, the United Nations is stating at least by 7 in the evening in the Middle East, 187 trucks had managed to enter. However, they did add that no fuel trucks had been permitted to travel up north, and this may be part of Hamas's grievance. In addition, 129,000 liters of fuel did enter the Gaza Strip in 4 different truckloads, and 4 trucks of natural gas and cooking gas had been allowed to enter the Gaza Strip as per the agreement. The IDF is reporting that between 61 and 65 humanitarian aid trucks had been allowed to move up north. However, again, that no fuel has been permitted to move up north. Moving on to the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity reported in the Jenin refugee camp, specifically in the Kabatia refugee camp. There are reported several divisions operating throughout the city and in the main hospital, with orders to dismantle the armed Jenin units. Amidst this, there was a report that Salah Amin Abu Ziyad, who is a prominent Palestinian Islamic Jihad member in Kabatia refugee camp, was arrested. In the ongoing fighting there, 2 Palestinians are reported killed and 7 are reported injured. Some reports suggest that among those killed is the son of the governor of Jenin. In addition, there was substantial IDF activity in the Balata refugee camp near Nablus, completing the operation that I reported on already yesterday. According to reports, this operation took over 14 hours, and that this is part of a large-scale operation of the IDF in the West Bank refugee camps in order to crack down on the different armed units. In addition, it was reported today that 2 Palestinians in Tulkarem were executed by a lynch mob of Palestinians after being accused of collaborating with Israel. According to reports, a local group calling itself the Securing the Resistance Group secured a confession of both Palestinians on tape, each stating that they received between 10,000 and 17,000 new Israeli shekels in order to cooperate with the IDF. They were then executed by firing squad and hung in town square. This comes amidst the reports of IDF activity in Tulkarem in the last week, where 6 Palestinians have been killed in different confrontations. Moving on to the north of Israel, the tensions remained very high, but no fighting was reported in the last 24 hours in this area as well. There were different alarms and air raid sirens that went off throughout the western Galilee, which later proved to be false alarms. The IDF is stating that the sensitivity of radars is set to maximum, and this explains some of the false alarms. In addition, UNIFIL is reporting that a vehicle of theirs in Taron town in southern Lebanon was damaged in one of the IDF retaliations, presumably in the last several days, because no other retaliations were reported in the last 24 hours. Other than that, there is no fighting reported in the north of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. Moving on to the regional reports, after several different false alarms in the southern areas of Eilat, Israeli F-16s did manage to intercept a drone that was on its way to Israel from the Red Sea, presumably sent from Yemen by the Houthis. Not reported at this point if it was an attack drone or a spy drone. This was intercepted by Israel. In addition, AP and El Miadin today reported that a ship owned by an Israeli was attacked with an Iranian-made suicide drone in the Indian Ocean. According to reports, the drone caused damage but no injuries. Later, a member of the Houthi political bureau, Hizam al-Assad, implied that the Houthis may be responsible for this, as he put out a tweet, or on X, stating, and I quote, "What happened to the Sami ship owned by Zionist businessman Idan Ofer in the Indian Ocean?" Right now, there are no other reports regarding who might have sent that drone. The Houthis are presumably responsible. However, at this point, they have not taken full responsibility. Moving on to some of the political and general trends, the German president is due to visit Israel next week. In addition, in response to the release of Emily Hand, the 9-year-old girl I mentioned before who also has Irish citizenship, the Irish Taoiseach today, Leo Varadkar, tweeted, and I'm quoting, "An innocent child who was lost has now been found and returned. Our prayers have been answered." Responding to this tweet by the Irish Prime Minister, Israeli Prime Minister office stated, and I'm quoting, "Emily Hand was not lost. She was brutally kidnapped by death squads who slaughtered her neighbors. She was not found. Hamas knew where she was all along and held her hostage. Hamas did not answer your prayers. It reacted to Israel's military pressure. So this is an ongoing political escalation between Israel and Ireland. That was Israelis' response to the Irish Taoiseach's statement. Regarding the future speculations of what is going to be in the Gaza Strip, Shlomi Eldar, who is a senior Israeli journalist covering Hamas for decades, today reported that he is hearing rumors that Palestinians emerging from the truce are seeing the devastation in the Gaza Strip, and for the first time there's growing internal outcry against Hamas leadership. So while Hamas has been governing the Gaza Strip de facto for upwards of 16 years, and there's been continuous devastation in the Gaza Strip, what is happening this time is so far worse that the Palestinian population is growing more and more unhappy with Hamas, and that Palestinians are starting to state a desire to establish a local leadership that will not be the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, but a local leadership that could take responsibility for the Gaza Strip. This may be also associated with reports I gave yesterday that even in Israel and Egypt, there is growing consideration that it might have to be some sort of interim government or a government that also is made up of local Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, not necessarily the Palestinian Authority, who take control of the Gaza Strip in the future. At this point, all speculations. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.